Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Hook 10 podcast. And today is a bit of a special episode because we're going to be starting off by reviewing the F1 movie that's the big budget blockbuster that's just come out and we've all seen over the weekend. We'll also look at the new Mercedes-AMG GT XX concept, which is their Porsche Taycan competitor. And then finally, we'll change tack and look at a much more affordable car with the new Renault Duster that has just been released in Australia. So let's get started with the our first topic of the day, which is the F1 movie. And I'm going to start by thinking about the length and the pacing of the movie. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts, Adash and Sammy. What did you guys think of the actual length and the pacing of the movie?
Go ahead, Sam, first.
So I found that usually when movies are long, they either can have you checking your watch regularly to see, when's this movie going to be over roughly, or you don't even notice the time because it's so entertaining that you like before you know it, 2.5 hours, which is roughly how long this movie has gone. And this movie definitely fell into the latter category for me. Apart from a couple of scenes where there was a bit of just like some of the dialogue wasn't that gripping. The vast majority of the film was extremely entertaining. You basically like didn't notice the time because every single scene was so well drawn together. Obviously, the racing scenes and the immediate aftermath of the races. Anytime that the owner of the team was in, even though he wasn't obviously racing, he was extremely entertaining character. The
Javier Bardem.
teammate JP was really good as well. And yeah, so I think the fact that basically I entered the theater and before I knew 2.5 hours were up really shows like it was pretty much gripping the whole way. You didn't need to check, how much longer it's got left to go and stuff.
Sam also missed the first couple of minutes though, so it was actually shorter for him. He came in late. But no, yeah, I agree. I think the pacing was actually pretty good. I think it helps when there's a lot of racing scenes as well. So if you like F1 or if you like racing in general, you're not really going to get bored by that. There's not an overload of dialogue. Um, so yeah, I didn't feel like it was dragging on too much. I did find that the racing scenes or the general action scenes were the highlight. It was pretty interesting to see how they were using the real races, the real Grand Prix, but they were interspersing the Apex GP cars into the scenes. So you could actually tell if you focused pretty closely on the cars, but I think if you didn't know the context behind it, which I think a lot of people going into the movie wouldn't have, they would have just been exposed to F1 for the first time, you wouldn't really notice. I was probably looking out for it. So yeah, I found the racing scenes like quite compelling and quite interesting. The dialogue, I could take it or leave it. I think some of the
Mm.
lines were pretty funny, like coming from an F1 fan. I'm not sure what you guys thought. Like for example, I think there's a scene around Brad Pitt talking to the lead engineer or lead technical director, and then he was like, "We're gonna get them in the turns, even though they're fast on the
Yeah,
straights." And then it's
yeah.
like, that's not going to be safe. And then Brad Pitt character is like, who said anything about being safe? Like, as if we're not in the most safest era of motorsport right now. So, yeah, you got to kind of suspend your disbelief a little bit at some parts if you know the ins and outs of the sport. But if you just take it as a pure action movie, I think it's a good time. And yeah, we saw it in VMAX. Did you see it in VMAX or Extreme Screen, Vivek, as well?
I saw an extreme screen, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw
I
it at
think
Jackson.
definitely seeing on a big screen with
Mm.
great audio really enhances the
Yeah.
experience. So definitely feels like a cinematic event, one you need to go see in a good cinema to get the most out of. But yeah, if you're just looking for a good time, um, it's a really kind of good movie to just go and watch with a few mates.
What did you think about that scene where they play, the poker with the, was it, what do they play the poker with? They played with like the,
The chips.
the chips or the stones or something. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but I thought that dragged on a bit. Like I think the point of that scene was to, uh, build some rapport between between Brad Pitt's character and JP,
Yeah,
but
JP. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dempsey
yeah,
Chris.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like I thought that was a bit like, I mean, like, yeah, we kind of got the point, and then like I felt that well that went on for a bit too long. I mean, I guess it made sense, and like that it sort of led to that romance scene between Brad Pitt's character and the technical lead of the Apex GP team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was a bit too long. And then I think my other comment was that like there's a lot of scenes where they've just said, okay, they go through this race, then they go through this race, and they go through this race. Like, did they really have to cover if like all of the races from like the second half of the season? Like, I thought they could have cut out some of the mentions of some of the Grand Prix races, but that's kind of my two cents.
Yeah.
But,
I thought the relationship part was of the movie was pretty unnecessary. Like you have a female
Yep, agree.
engineer. I think she can be her own character. She doesn't have to be the love interest of the driver. I thought that was just shoehorned in. But
yeah.
again,
Yeah.
you got to think about the audience they're going for. It's not really for the F1 fans. It's for the general public. And I think any good action movie or any good kind of blockbuster movie probably has a little bit of a love interest, a bit of romance, a bit of action, a bit of drama, whatever it may be. So perhaps that's why
Yeah.
they included it. But yeah, I'm coming from a like a F1 fan perspective where I'm like, was that necessary? Like you could focus on the racing, that's enough drama in itself, if you really kind of craft a story around that well.
Hmm.
I
And
thought the manager was a really good character as a side character, even though it wasn't directly racing. I thought every scene he was in, Ruben, the guy who basically brought him into the team, every time he was on the screen, I was like, it's going to be entertaining. But he wasn't in the film that much, I felt. Um, and I agree. I think that they could have replaced some of the romance parts with more of because they glossed over the fact that they used to race together, Sonny and like the former manager, they
hmm,
used to race together back in '93. And I feel like they could have developed that relationship more because I felt like his character, the manager's character, as in was way more interesting. Like whenever he was on screen, I was like one of the like then I knew the dialogue would be really, really good because his character was really interesting. But yeah, I would have rather seen him than the technical director, who, as you already mentioned, Adash, I think they could have just made her her own character rather than having to be a love interest. Because in real life, she actually does acknowledge this that it's not really proper for someone to be in a relationship with one of the drivers if you're obviously in the team, but then she does it anyway. So yeah.
what did
Yeah. I think like she based her character off of Bernie, the ex
Mm.
aerodynamicist or ex strategist rather at Aston Martin, who's now on the Sky coverage. So yeah, she had a pretty strong base to work off. And I mean I don't want to dwell on the point, but yeah, I think it would have been good for her to be her own character. And I think she had enough in the role to kind of bring forth um kind of something to the movie without needing to be just the token love interest.
Mm.
what did you guys think of
But
some of the uh scenes around like how Brad Pitt's character decides to warm up his or starts the car deliberately late and then he
later,
comes
and then
up
we saw it
for
in the
his
Austrian Grand
tire.
Prix.
Yeah, exactly. So his tires are
Yeah.
a bit warmer. Like, is that just complete hogwash?
I mean, we as
Yeah.
Sam said, we actually saw that kind of in with signs in the Austrian Grand Prix, so that kind of makes
But
sense.
not deliberately, but
Not
yeah.
deliberately, but I think it kind of makes sense. I mean, some of the other stuff, like where he went
He'd be
through it,
instantly
like
disqualified if he tried to stage a crash, which is effectively what he did to get the safety car out. I forgot which
yeah,
race it was. He
it's
got the
like
safety car out 3 times. That would immediately get you disqualified because you're effectively staging a crash
I think
to
they've
get.
called it back to Crashgate, back when
Yeah, yeah,
the Renaults kind of conspired to get Alonso into a good position in the race. And I think he ended up winning that race as well.
yeah,
So
correct.
they got fined massively, I think, for that and got docked points. So
Yeah, so in real life, it wouldn't work where you deliberately cause accidents to get the safety car out. But it works to the extent that it makes it entertaining. And certainly, red flags do happen. I remember last year, I think it was the Brazilian Grand Prix or the Sao Paulo Grand Prix last year when it was raining a lot, where they did have a red flag, but they're extremely rare. And obviously, for the final scene, just for that intensity, It's funny, it happened also just in this year's season, which was the race that they had the effectively the final 3 laps or the final only a couple of laps to go. It wasn't under red flag, it was under a safety car for ages, and then they basically
Yeah,
went for it.
yeah,
This was when
couple of
Hamilton was
GPs
taken
ago.
overtaken by Hulkenberg. I remember because he was on the some incorrect setup or something.
And then
So it can happen where
when
it just
Verstappen
turns
went
into a
into
shootout.
when Verstappen went into to George, that was that race, wasn't it?
Yes.
What
Yeah,
was
yeah,
that?
yeah.
It's a couple of
So
races.
it can happen, but yeah, it was for the drama. But honestly, from watching the film, it's pretty clear that it wasn't aimed at hardcore F1 fans. Really, the idea here is to similar to Drive to Survive, which, if you remember, the board member was like, "I've binged all of Drive to Survive," so they acknowledged the influence that show has had on the
Um,
sport. But similar to that, it's designed for a mainstream audience. I've got F1 25, the video game, and about a couple of days ago, they released a tie-in. So you can, in the F1 25 video game, you can play through the scenarios from the movie, like in the video game. So there's a whole like a lot of promotion, and obviously during the races in the Austrian Grand Prix, certainly in the Canadian Grand Prix, in the Monaco Grand Prix, there are ads from the movie, trailers for the movies all around the track. So
the thing I couldn't get
it's
over
also to
is
promote the brand.
like although yeah, sure, it's aimed at people that aren't necessarily F1 fans. I don't think they needed to explain the rules in such a kind of basic manner for for every single race. The commentary wasn't commentary. It was literally this is what happens when there's a safety car, and this is what happens when someone pits during the safety car. They lose less time, and then you've literally got like Martin Brundle explaining the rules to Crofty, which is funny enough kind of actually happens in real life sometimes. Crofty gets it wrong sometimes, but. I found it like really jarring. I was like, I just want to focus on the racing, and then I'm hearing this other kind of commentary that's like speaking to me like I'm a 5-year-old. So I don't know. I found that weird. Like if
Mm.
you compare it to Rush, for example, 2013 movie between that was talking about the rivalry between was it Nicky Lauda and James Hunt in the
Niki Lauda
70s.
and James Hunt.
Yeah. So that movie, I don't think you needed to necessarily be an F1 fan to watch that, but they didn't sort of pander to people who are new to the sport as well.
Mm.
They kind of just let the action speak for itself. So I would prefer that kind of approach, but yeah, I think this is heavily backed by the FIA, F1 as well. So I think for them, they look at this as the entry point for a new audience. So maybe that's kind of one of their agendas behind it.
Yeah, and I think to
Mm.
your point about, I'll quickly wrap up this sort of topic, but to your point about other car or racing movies, I mean, this is obviously the highest production values, definitely. I would still consider uh, Ford versus Ferrari to be a better movie as a racing movie. It's not F1, but I think that how they treated that rivalry in with the 24 hours of Le Mans between Ford and Ferrari. It's quite a more compelling plot, and I also really like. I mean, I have to have a shameless plug here for Mad Max Fury Road, just because I think it's a very entertaining movie. But we might move on. So the next topic, speaking of racing and performance, so Mercedes has come out with a new Mercedes-AMG GT XX concept. So this is going to be their high power Porsche Taycan competitor. So in terms of some of the key specs, there's a very low drag coefficient of 0.198, four-door ultra performance saloon, 0 to 60 miles per hour or 96 kilometers an hour in under 3 seconds, top speed above 360 kilometers an hour. So that's very, very fast acceleration. I think for EV high performance cars, anything under 3 seconds is now sort of like almost like a requirement. A three motor powertrain, all-wheel drive. So yeah, all of the specs are up there, but I wanted to ask about the styling. So what do you guys think of the styling, and what are your other initial thoughts? Adarsh?
I think this is actually in a very different direction for Mercedes in a lot of ways. Like if you looked at that car and if it didn't say AMG, at the back of it in the rear. I don't think you would even think that's a Mercedes. So yeah, it's kind of like they've gone in a completely different direction with this one. I think that there's some elements there that have the potential for a nice looking car. Like I like the silhouette, I like the kind of general shape. I think it's a bit nicer than the current EQ range. And I can see what they've gone for at the front with those high set headlamps and that kind of fish-like grille at the bottom, which is more sort of Maserati or some of the kind of harks back to some early sports cars. But somehow proportionally, it's like they they haven't quite executed it so well at the front.
Mm.
So yeah, I can see what they were going for, but I don't think it's overall the most successful design. But if you look at some of the more recent concepts on the next kind of slide we've got here, so they've got the 111 concept, which I think they've tried to draw some inspiration from, which itself was a kind of remake of the original C triple one concept from back in the 70s. But I don't think they've successfully introduced the elements in the latest concept. I think they've tried to bring some of the original concepts, but at the same time, it doesn't quite look as resolved as it could be. Like they've gone through a few different kind of electric sedan concepts here. So they've got the Vision EQXX, the Vision AMG as well. Um, there's even kind of like spy photos of what is meant to be the production car, which looks a little bit more, I think, like the Vision EQXX.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't actually expect it to really look like this when it comes out. Looking at those spy photos, maybe the rear could have some of those circular elements, but I think with the front, they just try to go in a very different direction, explore what it looks like. But as for this time, I don't think they've kind of executed as well as they could have.
Yeah. I think I agree with you there, Dash. Like it just doesn't look like a Mercedes. Like it doesn't really like you look at their current EQ range and granted they're trying to move away from that because that had there's just the general design language with that sort of jelly bean style shape hasn't been received very well. But even compared to their like conventional models, the conventional combustion engine models and the outgoing AMG GT four-door performance saloon. It just looks completely, yeah, it just looks like a stark departure, and it just looks too generic to me. Like for me, the front end is giving hints of sort of Ferrari, California with the way the headlights are shaped and that grille, like those vertical slats. Yes, they're looking at the It's like that Panamericana grille that some of the AMG models have previously had, but yeah, it's just like positioned too low, and it just looks a bit looks a bit off. And then you have a look at the interior, and they've gone for that silly yoke style steering wheel, which I and granted this is a concept, so you don't know what the production model. Maybe they'll have like a conventional steering wheel, or maybe they'll have this as an option. But it's just pointless. Like there's no for a what is going to be a GT car, like it is literally has the word GT in the name. It's not some out and out track car. It's not an F1 car with some insanely quick steering ratio. Like it's just there's no point in having that. And then interior, they've continued with the Mercedes' typical approach of the recent years, which is to focus more on style over substance and go all out with the ambient lighting and all of the bling and the chrome and the sort of jewelry there to put it to frame it in one way. And it's just like it doesn't I don't know, it doesn't really look that luxurious. Like it's just like they've put two screens in front of the driver, put in a yoke steering wheel, and then they've kind of essentially called it a day, put some Alcantara there. So I'm not a fan, and I also don't like the fact that at the rear there's doesn't seem to be any uh proper rear window. I don't know if that will be carried over through to the production version, but the fact that the concept has a blanked out rear windscreen is not a good sign, in my opinion.
It's a video game interior. It's like a racing simulator inside,
Yeah.
or a disco, which is similar to
Yeah.
a lot of the AMG or even general Mercedes interiors. I think they really need to rethink that kind of interior architecture. They've gone in one direction, which is super chintzy, super blingy,
Mm.
which appeals maybe to some, but I think if you put it against even to what, some of the recent kind of entrants such as Genesis are doing, I think they're behind the game now. Others have realized what it takes to bring the interiors up to par in the modern world when it comes to the luxury market. And Mercedes have gone in one direction, but I just don't think it's the right direction. I think they need to go back to their core values, go back to traditional luxury, still have, the modern tech in there, but not take it so far in a direction where it just feels cold, lifeless, and more like a video game than an actual car that you're sitting in and enjoying.
Sandip, did you have any
Hmm.
thoughts?
I think you guys have more or less covered it. I think when I first saw this car, it looked so similar to Maserati's current cars, at least from the front, maybe not from the rear. But really, I kind of feel like with the modern day manufacturers trying to design supercars, I feel like um, certainly it's harder and harder possibly to be a bit unique, even now, like, even from other brands. You're more or less seeing evolutionary styling more so than radically different styling. The other big thing, and then we've talked about this, obviously being an all-electric supercar, we kind of now know that the demand for electric supercars, not even like hybrid is obviously super popular, and certainly full naturally aspirated ones, but fully electric supercars, yes, the Taycan's been successful, but that's still a Porsche. This is a Mercedes. Mercedes, we know, have already, relatively speaking, been struggling a bit more compared to BMW to sell their existing non-performance electric range. So it'll be curious what. Obviously, they're not expecting big numbers. It'll be a limited production kind of car, but still, I'd be curious to see the demand for an all-electric supercar that would, I'm sure, in Australian dollars, probably cost 150, 200, if not more than that, how much demand there is for an electric supercar. I think other brands haven't like they've got the mix obviously of still naturally aspirated, as well as hybrid and electric. So I'll be curious to see in that end. Like, yeah, it's a cool. Everything else aside, how much demand will there be for a Mercedes electric supercar?
Yeah.
Do we
Big,
know if the AMG GT4 does getting a traditional combustion engine replacement, or if this is going to be the replacement?
good
I
question.
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure. Like, I know Mercedes, all of these, like, and Mercedes is an example of this, but all of these brands, in 2022, they all went, oh, we'll be electric by 2030, or we'll be 80% BEV, and they're all backtracking now.
Or
So,
walking it back, yeah.
yeah, I would expect at this stage that it would get a combustion engine replacement, and this would be like an electric alternative. I don't think Mercedes would. Maybe they might, like, but I would be doubtful that they would put all their eggs in this orange basket, so to speak.
Yeah. Same Bib said, like we've already seen with the Taycan, I guess in the States you've got the Lucid Air Sapphire as well. That high end of electric supercars, it's not really a space you want to be in as a manufacturer at the moment. One, if you do sell the car, then great, but then the depreciation is massive after that. People just aren't able to sell it at a reasonable price where they can retain some of the value. So it's not really a lucrative space at the moment. So yeah, I think Mercedes will be wise to continue with a two-pronged strategy when it
Yeah,
comes to their powertrain for a little bit. I think when it comes to their flagship sports cars.
that's right. Okay, I think we might wrap it up there with the Mercedes-AMG GT XX, and we might move on to what might be the most relevant topic for Australian motorists, which is the reveal and the launch of the new Dacia. Sorry, pardon my phrasing, not the new Dacia, the new Renault Duster, which is a Dacia in Europe, but is being sold as a um, Renault here. So we have it's a small SUV. There's two engine options. We have a 1.3 liter turbo petrol four-cylinder, which is paired with a front-wheel drive drivetrain. Then we also have, interestingly, a smaller 1.2 liter three-cylinder mild hybrid, which is paired with the all-wheel drive drivetrain and is also manual only. And pricing ranges from 31,990 for the base auto, all the way up to 37,990 for the top spec 4x4 or all-wheel drive manual. So yeah, it's an interesting pricing strategy, an interesting specifications strategy. What do you guys think as your initial reaction? Sandwich?
We already know from the success of the Suzuki Jimny that small off-road focused SUVs that are relatively speaking affordable definitely have a market here in Australia. So obviously, the Jimny, apart from its off-road abilities, isn't a particularly great car. Obviously, its interior is not very good. Apparently, its on-road driving characteristics aren't that great either. Renault, obviously, for this, are hoping that a much more up-to-date, modern version of the Jimny, to the extent that it's quite good at off-road and obviously being relatively speaking affordable, should get maybe some of those people who would otherwise be in that sort of Jimny market. I believe that for the promotion, they're going to do the entry-level Duster for 35K drive away. So that's all on-road costs included, which would be a pretty good deal. Yes, the entry level is a 4x2, not a 4x4, but still, even lots of Jimny owners often don't take their things off road, so this would still be pretty good. Yes, it's a bit strange that the 4x4 being primarily not only available sort of in manual is going to limit its customer base, because we sort of know when the automatic Jimny came in, yet even though the manual Jimny is still good, it certainly opened it up and made it a lot more accessible to people who might not be able to drive manual. So, but then the problem with the 4x2 is that yes, it offers auto, but then like the whole point of buying this car would be to access the off-roading features. And if it's 4x2, it's not going to be as effective. So, because at that point, if it's just 4x2, then you're competing with the Chinese brands, and then it's like, okay, how good is the value for money compared to that? But as I mentioned earlier, the Jimny's other big problem is, yes, it's great off-road, but its interior is extremely dated. It doesn't drive that well on road. This car looks, well, I mean, from what I understand reading overseas reviews, it drives like back in the day, it used to not be a particularly pleasant car, but certainly the current generation we're getting now is quite good. And the interior is fully modern, got all the latest technology, especially for the $35,000 for the entry level. It comes with most features that you'd want, including most safety features. And it does come with, a pretty large touchscreen, even fancy stuff like wireless phone charging is in the base model, all LED headlights, so no halogen in terms of the headlights. Yeah, so the only thing I'd say is that Renault in Australia, unlike in the Europe, is not a particularly mainstream brand. So yes, it's certainly not unknown, but still lots of people associate French brands here in Australia with maybe not a great reputation. So I'll be curious to see how Renault market this car. Will they lean in heavily on the Renault, that it's a Renault, or will they try and make it its own thing and be like, just buy it because of the price and off-road capabilities?
Yeah. I think this car, like a lot of people are more interested in having the perception of a vehicle that is able to go off-road rather than actually taking it off-road. And I
Mm,
think the styling really caters to that. Like it has that sort of very rough and rumble or rough and tumble type design. It has those rugged sort of side panels. It has it has that bold sort of stance, the sort of aggressive detailing with even the tail, like how the tail lights sort of almost look like a triangle. And yeah, it's a cool looking, it's a cool looking car. I think they've done a great job with the styling. I think the pricing, to Sandra's point, is quite reasonable as well. Like that's in the market for with a lot of like entry level sort of MG and Cherry vehicles. So it'll be interesting to see how it compares at that sort of lower end of the market. I am interested to see how the safety rating translate. So in Europe, this car has achieved a 3-star Euro NCAP safety rating. Now, ANCAP is mostly aligned with Euro NCAP, but the difference is that in Australia, ANCAP is very influential. Like they are well, it is well known that many fleets and even many private buyers have a sort of almost mandatory requirement to have like a 5-star ANCAP safety rating. So this car being rated at 3 stars and not even 4 stars is it might be a factor that could detract from sales. So I'll be interested to see how that sort of plays out. Adash, I might pass over to you if you had any thoughts or comments on this car.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pricing is key here. So I think given they've what it's starting at is at 32K, I think it gives it a good
Yeah.
starting point around making some roads into this market.
35K drive away for the entry level.
Right, for the entry level, yeah. I think yeah, I was a little bit bemused by the powertrain option, the higher end powertrain only being available for the 4x2, and you're only getting a 3-cylinder mild hybrid for the 4x4. I think it's down on torque as well. And then as Sam mentioned, it's only manual too. So I think that definitely will limit its appeal a little bit. And I think at the very least they should have the auto option available on the 4x4 as well to ensure that gets the required adoption. I think in 2025 you need an auto option on a mainstream vehicle for all grades, not just one grade. So I think that'll be the key. Just making sure they can get the specs right here, and they can also market it well. Given Renault's, let's say, not market leading position here, or even close to market leading position in Australia, I think you need to get that awareness out there about this car. And if you're competing with the likes of the Suzuki Jimny, Subaru Crosstrek, your traditional kind of Hyundais, Toyotas, Mazdas, etc., you need to find a way to stand out. And you need to be able to market this well too. So it's a new kind of nameplate here. You need to get the word out there. And I think in Europe, they've had, what, 3 generations now of the
Yeah,
Dacia.
that's right.
Um, they built a little bit of a reputation as a cheap and cheerful but reliable car. That kind of reputation just is non-existent here. So I would say that I am glad that we are getting a third generation and not the first or second though. I think you look at those, I'm not sure they would have had as much of a shot here as the third generation does. It definitely looks a lot more premium, a lot more resolved, and it definitely has that kind of rough and tumble look that you want when you want an off-roader to look like it can actually go off-road, compared to the kind of budget econo box kind of look of the previous 2 generations. So they've got a couple of things right for sure, but yeah, I'd like to see kind of the specs be improved a little bit in terms of what they bring here, in terms of the order and in terms of the powertrain options.
It'll be interesting to see because Renault, like, they don't spend a whole amount of money on marketing in Australia, like compared to the brand awareness that, Hyundai, Kia, even some of these now Chinese brands like Chery and MG, you see so many dealerships, so many ads. Like Renault has been established for quite a long time, but it's not the first um brand that comes to mind when you think of like a small sort of SUV at this sort of like below 40K price range. Like they've been promoting the Koleos for a while now, which has had so many different deals and but that's a quite an old model and that's sort of one size up. But so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But yes, I do think that they need a auto for the 4x4 all-wheel drive model. I mean, I think this must be one of the few cars in its class that is even available with a manual transmission these days. I think most of the rivals are all um, automatic only. So yeah, it's an interesting choice that they've decided to bring a manual drivetrain. I am interested to see how it comes with this U-clip accessory system. So I'm interested to see what accessories are available in Australia. I know in the UK and in Europe you can get like a sleep pack, which is like almost like a mattress in a box, and you can sort of fold down the seats and put a mattress in there. That caters to like those people who want to go camping and all of that. I'm not sure whether that will be available in the Australian market, but Yeah, I guess it's one point of differentiation, but again, I think that's a niche selling point. I don't think many buyers really are going to like plump too much for those accessories. So it'll be a car that's sold on its styling and probably the price. So let's see how we go. Yeah, any closing comments from either of you?
I'd say I think it depends on the success of this product, but we might see further kind of rebadge statues in the future if this goes well. So the Big Stir, I think, does it
Mm,
have, is it
that's
seven
right.
seats, the Big Stir, or is it 5 seats as well?
I
I think it's
believe
a little bit
it's
bigger.
the let's have a look. Is it the it's obviously it is um
I know it's a bit bigger, but
yeah
it's based on the same platform.
yeah
I'm not sure if it necessarily has more seats,
yeah
but
I think
I
it's
mean
yeah
that would be a good niche if it can
it
seat
is
seven.
5-seater yeah.
Is a 5 seater? Okay. I was gonna say if it could seat seven, that would feel like a good niche where an affordable 7 seater that can go off road,
Mm,
that isn't kind of costing an arm and a leg. But yeah, if it's a 5 seater as well, what would that go up against? The next size above, right? Which is what, the
yeah.
CX-5 kind of category, I think.
Yeah, I believe this is one sort of
Mm.
like one size smaller. So the big star, I mean, it could be a replacement for like the Koleos in a sense. Like
Yeah,
they could decide to swap out the Koleos for the Big Star.
yeah,
And then yes, it would, I believe it would go against like the CX-5, RAV4, X-Trail, whereas this is more of like a Qashqai, maybe Corolla Cross type uh rival. So yeah, yes.
yeah. They should really lean into the kind of off-roading side of this, and rather than just
Yeah.
the general kind of this is a cheap SUV
Mm,
positioning. I think that's how they're going to differentiate. There's not a lot of cars that have that capability within this price range, to actually stand out. Most of them are just basically general cars on stilts, whereas this I think has some level of off-road ability. So I think that's what they need to lean into. And I think Aussies, they are keen off-roaders compared to a lot of other markets too. We've got the Outback, of course, so people love to go
mm,
out in the bush and explore. So yeah, if they can position this the right way, yeah, we might see future kind of products
mm.
along the same line from Renault.
It's interesting how they're going to market the Renault brand as a whole because you have cars like the Megane E-Tech, which is their small electric, a completely electric SUV, and that's like priced from around the sort of 55K mark, goes up to I believe the low 60Ks, and that's maybe even a little bit smaller than this, but that's positioned as a much more sort of premium vehicle because that was a Renault from inception, and the Renault brand in Europe is positioned as a more premium offering than because in Europe this car and the Big Star and other models such as the Sandero and the Stepway, they're all positioned under the Dacia brand, which is almost like Skoda, but even cheaper than Skoda. So in Australia, the Renault brand is sort of having to cover like this entry level price point with rugged sort of market perception all the way to this premium sort of price point. So I don't know how they're going to position Renault as like on one end, is it going to be like a French alternative to like Volkswagen? And then on the other end, on this sort of Duster sort of side, it's going to be like a rugged sort of Skoda alternative, or what are they going to do? Because that there has to, they're kind of stretching the brand in both directions. So it'll be interesting to see how that works from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, they're kind of just trying everything at the moment to stay afloat and be competitive in this market. So I applaud them for trying something different and bringing this here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it remains to be seen how well they do. But I think, yeah, the price is a good starting point to at least get into the market and be relatively competitive with the offering they've got.
Okay. I think that's some good analysis. So we might wrap it up there. So thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, we'll see you guys in next week's episode. Thank you. Bye.